Industry 4.0 is a very well-known construct. It's a milestone. And what is a milestone? Something that shows you a direction in a particular order. And so 1.0 leadership was largely about muscularity. It was magical leadership. The Hollywood hero with a tilted hat vanishing into the sunset was the prototypical model of 1.0 world. And so the biggest biceps would be leaders. Okay, and women had no chance there. It was a male-dominated world where might was right. And so physicality, muscularity became the dominant milestone for being a leader. So even in the corporations, organizations, people were recruited based on their height, weight, physical appearance. And so that was the understanding of leadership then. And slowly, as the Industrial Revolution came about, 2.0, yielded place to methods. So muscles were replaced by methods. The machine world, the steam engine, and all that Great Britain, England gave to the world, helped them dominate the world through methods. You see, the British conquered the Mughal Empire through gunpowder. Literally, they had invented methods. And so from pure physicality, the whole onus of leadership was who had the best methods, who had the most efficient method of production. And from there, we moved to the internet age, around the time when the Berlin Wall comes down and the internet comes up, same year. We start seeing that the physical empires were crumbling and the mental empires, the mind's empires were being established, largely through the revolution that we conventionally know as the internet, right? What happened is then information could move across geographies without geographical barrier. And so we could start a business in North America or India and scale that business in a way based on the flow of information. So if I own the information architecture of any business, I could run the business from any geography. So the dominant models of business were something like Reebok and Nike, giant shoemakers. They didn't need to own a shoe factory to be able to, the dominant players in that business. And you could see that very slowly the business is equal to real estate shifted to business is equal to mental state. How you dominate. So mind share was as good as market share. And because you could, through the information flow, you could sort of capture the mind spaces. And so so empires of the mind were being built. And then 4.0 came when people realized that it is not information that is of value, because information is dirt cheap. You can click of a button, you can get information, anything you want. What matters is how do you respond to the information? How do you receive information and respond to it? That is the key, not what information, but how. And so the world of 4.0 essentially means that from the muscular to the methodical to the relational world of the internet, we are now moving into what is called the responsive world, where leaders who can respond in quick time to opportunities and threats and are able to create products and processes that can capture the imagination. Because today it is so much more easy to capture a market share. Just to give you an example, when Facebook got created, it took them 3 years plus, 3.5 years to get to their first 50 million customers. For WhatsApp, it was 15 months. For a video game called Angry Bird, it was 15 days. Jio, this product that the Ambanis created, in 80 odd days, it got the first 50 million customers. So scaling up was possible, provided the idea was big and you could respond in real time to opportunities that existed. So just to give you an example, two design students from Rhode Island School of Design decided in San Francisco that there was a spare room. In fact, a spare room and a bed, air bed, and some breakfast. So they could rent out this space for somebody who would not be able to pay for hotel costs. So they started in San Francisco, essentially by renting out that. In 1 year, they had about 100 nights sold. Okay, in about 10 years, Airbnb had several million rooms sold just by sharing the information architecture. They could fill up vacant rooms around the world, and the organization grew to a greater value than American Airlines and Hilton Group of Hotels. So you can see the whole process of finding an opportunity and then scaling up a solution became so much more easy that you did not need intensive capital investment. You did not need land mass. You did not even need a very bright mind. So these two guys were design students. They had no idea about the internet. So they hired somebody called Nathan who had idea of how to operate. So you could hire the network. But if the idea is big and if you're willing to respond in real time, you could create an empire. And this is something that was unthought of. You see? And so what is happening in this space is essentially this. We are looking at not just the evolution of the machine, we are looking at the adaptive capacity of the human constitution. This is the evolutionary aspect of business that most people don't seem to notice. So you're saying that the whole journey of 4.0 is essentially an evolution of reality through the human brain, human constitution. So reality is this, but our ability to process that reality was limited because our mental models were based on some formulae which was ancient, right? Now those mental models are shifting very quickly. How I see the world is very different from how my children are seeing the world. Two different mental models of the world. One mental model says, okay, I'm in Coimbatore, I have to travel to Calicut, and it is about 4 hours travel time, and then I have to go to Bombay, which is another 1,000 kilometers. But they don't think that. They think that it is just one click and another click and the third click. So for them, the model is not the physicality of the journey, but the mind game that takes them there. This shift in the hardware of the brain and the shift in the software of the mind is creating a very new world, because the world you see there is nothing more than the models you carry in your head. We have an expression called frog in the well. Frog in the well means somebody who's blinded by limited experience, right? Now you can see what actually, if you look at a frog's eye vision, frog is able to see only a handful of things. Quickly shifting light, lines, and just about some shadows. In short, a frog sees two things: that which it has to eat and that which will eat it. Okay, and no more than that. So if you look at the frog in the well syndrome, which means the frog is limited in its range of vision and can only see this much. Now the well has gotten bigger, but we are still frogs. Okay, the well has gotten bigger. So the point I'm trying to make is this mental model that we carry in our head are shifting very rapidly, and in a way that we haven't been able to even imagine. So if you look at the cumulative shift in the mental models of one generation, the world is going to look very, very different based on those shifting models. And it is the, I think, education profession that has to first recognize, notice that, and change the way we educate people, not based on what happened in the past, but based on what is possible. Not repeating history, teaching history, Ashoka, Sher Shah, but learning from it and saying, how do we now look at the future? So the whole thrust of education in 4.0 world will be to reimagine the future. Because technology has moved from hardware to software to everywhere now. Now, in this room that we are sitting in, we have 1 trillion devices. 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 1 trillion devi as much sophisticated technology as would be required to launch a rocket in the moon right now in this room. The quality of technology we have. But the fact is this, that this technology is now commonplace. It is not the repository of NASA or ISRO, right? So what I'm saying is the democratization of the technological prowess would mean that my ability, mental ability, is magnified many more times. I can sit here and with the click of a button reach a message to the President of America if I have the right channels, right? It's possible. So I can draw his attention to something that's happening in Coimbatore in no time. I don't have to carry protocol and physical barriers. Just a click of a button. Can you see the enormity of that opportunity? What does it mean for a country like India? It means that the unit of currency of a nation will no longer be rupee, dollar, yen. It will be a human being. And if unit of currency of a nation is a human being, you can see which are the two richest countries in the world, and rightly so. China and India will dominate the world because there is no greater technology as sophisticated as this human constitution is. And technologically speaking, this is a marvel because this system can adapt. Unlike an algorithm, a human being can adapt. And so this will be the era of the human currency. And 4.0 is taking us to that threshold. And I'm pretty optimistic that if a country like this harnesses its raw potential, energetic potential, then we will not write essays about India's population problem. We'll talk about population advantage, right? And why? Because anything you produce in India has a market within this country because of the vastness of the population. An idea has a chance to become reality in no time. Governments of the day will have to change. They cannot survive being in the position they're in. The kind of stuff that's happening in Karnataka and elsewhere will be seen as absolutely idiotic by another generation of Indians. I don't think they'll have zero tolerance for such things. They'll put pressure on the political system to have clean water, because instantaneously they will know the quality of the water in Coimbatore versus quality of the water in Delhi, and there'll be comparisons available to you, air quality. So people will monitor air quality on a desktop, on a handheld machine, and say, I'm not going to drive through this place because my lung capacity will be reduced by this percentage. You will have that data right there. So politicians will be up against it. And if politicians are up against it, the bureaucracy will be up against it. And they will have to change the way they govern. So I think, unlike many people who feel very pessimistic about the world, global warming and all of that, I said our ability to evolve and adapt far surpasses the calamities of nature. And I don't take a negative view of things. I would like people to believe that 4.0 is the threshold where this is going to shift. The onus of responsibility shifts from mega organizations, governments, to a single individual sometimes, who can sit and start a mini revolution based on insight, based on mental energy and ability to evangelize, persuade a large group of people. And we are seeing those movements everywhere. You see, from nowhere an Anna Hazare comes and takes the whole country by storm. Why? Because, he is evangelizing something that is deeply human. And so anybody who can understand and then leverage human nature would be the leader going forward. So 4.0 is actually a human revolution, not a technological revolution. More precisely, I think it's a human evolution, to be more. Because, even a revolution is an evolution. Revolution is complete when you come back to the same point from where you began. And then you find a different source in the same point, which you did not find the first time around. That's when a revolution becomes complete. So when you evolve, you are bringing about a revolution. That's what a Buddha did, that's what a Gandhi did. They just evolved as people. And they brought about the kind of revolution only which they could. This is not very different. Okay, just that technology is the enabler. but the human source, not the resource. I have a heavy problem with the word human resource. Unlike coal, unlike wood, human being is not a resource, because human beings can replenish themselves, reproduce themselves, change, adapt. And there's a source within a human being that makes it possible. For lack of a better word, let's call it the spiritual space. Okay. And so from that software, I think we become a source. And people talk about the divine. For me, divine is that intelligence which is dispersed in every human being, every creature. So wisely dispersed that it all makes sense together. And nobody can bring that harmony unless one acquires the humility and the omnipresence of that source. And a human being is the basic turning point in nature's evolution. And I have said that yesterday, that awareness which was dormant in a rock and was moving up in a plant and walking in an animal, awakened in a human being. When that awakening happens, a revolution truly takes place. Because that is the source of all revolution. You talk about the French Revolution or the Russian Revolution. It's always one human being, handful of human beings, who created a new mental model for seeing the world. That started from the human entity. It did not start from the Berlin Wall. Did not fall down because of political plans. It fell down because people started having conversations like you and I in a marketplace, in the cathedrals. And they started having conversations about how the wall should come down, and it came down, right? But there was struggle involved. When I was given a piece of the Berlin Wall by a German doctor, and I saw a huge wall in his compound, and I said, "What is this wall about?" And I saw something interesting. On one side of the wall, I saw writing, graffiti in German. On the other side, I saw small holes. I said, "What are these?" And he said, "These are bullet marks." So if anybody from East Germany wanting to climb the wall was shot down. And so how did the wall come down? I said, just because of conversations, human conversations. So conversations started the conversion process. And this conversation stabilized. Somebody described this as memes, M-E-M-E-S. They're like genes. Memes are what is called unit of the mind that becomes viral, goes viral. And it is sort of encoded in everybody. So the wall has to come down. Are you with me? So Anna Hazare started a meme revolution. So somehow he unleashed, because of the quality of life he lived, something very deep in the Indian. And this is what Gandhi did in a much larger scale. So you can see those revolutions that we're talking about. What the internet has done, it has changed the way we see the world. But where did it originate? In a single human perception, shift in perception. Everything technological is an outcome. Technology is derivative of science, and science is an outcome of how the human being sees the world. Okay, so if I see the world differently, it's not going to be the same world anymore. Not just for me, but for everybody else. That's it.
So how do you see this, getting incorporated into the educational system as of now? Because you see, when everybody is talking about technology and everything, you are talking about something very different.
Sure.
Or you are talking about the human mind. In the current scenario, how do you see this getting,
education will move from cognition, which is what it is now. Cognition means I set up a classroom structure like this. Within 4 walls, I'm teaching kids as captive units, about history, geography, physics. That's called high dose of cognitive learning, where you are learning through secondary sources. So it's like this, you say the mother knows about the child as opposed to mother knows the child. There's a difference between the two, right? Knowing about the child is having information about the child, but knows the child, if it's your own child, you will know the child as though it's a direct knowing, not a secondary knowledge. So I think more and more education will move from cognition to immersion. What is immersion? You are totally saturated in the learning space. So in geography, you are taught at what temperature rice or paddy grows, and you by heart those temperatures, 30 degrees or whatever. And then after some time you forget about it. right? But if you were to go to a field and see the temperature in which rice actually grows, you'll have a sense of what is through immersion. You see my point? And that immersion then learning will not just be cerebral, learning will be visceral, learning will be total. And learning will be through emotions, through cognition, through action. Now, more and more, I think in a IIM setup, we are sending out students and say, go and figure out how companies work, how markets behave, how consumers desire things. And you figure out for yourself, not according to Drucker or Einstein or Debashish Chatterjee, but according to you. You see, the moment I ask a question, they say, tell me what is efficiency. Now they will say, according to so-and-so, according to Taylor. I said, for God's sake, I want to know according to you, what is efficiency? Now, we don't have the courage to give an original answer because originality is lost. We are carriers of secondary information sets. So all of us are by-hearting what Drucker said, what Vivekananda said, what Tagore said. I'm saying, what are you saying? See, even this people, the great people, had change of Milton models when they learned. See, Tagore composed poems and songs both, right? So one day he was walking through rural Bengal with a British visitor. And a farmer was singing a song in a very crude voice. So Tagore stopped to hear it. The British visitor said, why did you stop? As far as I can make out, this song is not being sung too well. He said, yes, that's true, but that's a song I composed. And I'm hearing it because I realize that even after I'm gone, my poems may not be read so much, but my songs will be sung. So the national song is Tagore's composition, it is still being sung. And he had this because songs are easy to be immersed in. Poetry requires a lot of cerebral activity. But song you can immediately get into, right? Because it appeals to the heart, to the emotion, to the mind, everything, body. Music transforms you, right? So this is immersion. I think education will move from education, which is education of the head. Right now it is education, it is not education. And so education will draw out that individual. It will be the potential to learn through the entirety of my constitution. The whole body learns. See, learning is embodied. How do I learn to walk? By walking. How do I learn to dance? By dancing. Not by looking at a textbook on walking. Okay? So the feedback loop, when my entire body is involved, is much greater. The feedback loop works and I learn through trial and error. I fall 700 times before I learn to walk finally. But that falling down is also learning, right? In our school system, falling down means failing. If I can't so that goes against the very grain of learning. Learning means trial and error. This God-given brain is an error-correcting machine. It is not anything more than that. It is constantly correcting errors. It is making judgments about the world and correcting it. And that's how the brain grows, through trial and error. Right? But you are cutting that down. See, unless you pass an exam, you are not qualified to be a learner. But passing an exam is not learning. Okay? So all the models on which the education system, all the foundation that it stands on is crumbling very quickly. And rightly so, because learning is fundamentally not about just cognition. So these are the two drastic changes I can see. You see, overt emphasis on succeeding in exams, a huge emphasis on cognition as opposed to immersion. This is not going to work going forward. Now think of the ancient Gurukul and the modern interpretation of it. What was a Gurukul? Gurukul is where individual-centered learning was happening in a natural context, environment. So you could learn at your own pace and you would be guided individually. Now with mass education, that's not education. This is actually mass information vending. Okay? That changed. But we are coming back again to that system where learning is going to be personalized. It will happen at the time and pace of the learner. And it will happen whenever the learner wants to learn. In short, whatever is not learnt is not taught. Unless I learnt it, it has not been taught. That will be the model. Instead of covering this syllabus, teachers will discover the learner. I was sharing notes with the group yesterday. I go to a school and I ask, what do you teach? History. What do you teach? Geography. What do you teach? Geometry. Then you ask, does anybody teach a student here? You don't teach any of the subjects. You don't create learning in class. You create the learner. And the learner learns, not you. Okay? You create the atmosphere for learning. So the job of a teacher will change dramatically from being a vendor of information to a creator of ambience, where learning becomes spontaneous, visceral, immersive, personalized. And the change structures in the system will happen. So you'll see classroom walls will not define the limits of a classroom. It will be where conversation begins and conversation ends. It could be anywhere in the world. So I may have a school in Kozhikode, but I may be talking to somebody in California. And for me, learning is going on, not within my classrooms, but within the limits of human capacity and human minds, ability to grasp something. And this is very, very true. Very, very true. And what you see, the unfolding of a very different design for schools, colleges, universities, and educators will be of a very different kind than the ones that you see today. That's my belief.
As far as the new education policy is concerned, I mean, they are talking about research universities and teaching universities and colleges being one of the premier institutes in the country. How do you see the gap between research and academics? Or, I mean, how is it going to solve this issue, sir? How do you think?
What you conventionally call research is nothing but curiosity. The very core of research is I want to have a structure through which curiosity is propagated, questions are propagated. The trouble is our structures propagate answers, not questions. It's a very top-down structure where the policymakers know everything. I was asked by a very important member of the Prime Minister's office as to whether I was involved in the education policy. I said no. And then I was asked, what did I think about it, whether I read it? I said yes. I said, not an 80-year-old scientist, but a 30-year-old young man should have been the chairman of the policy. Much as I respect the scientist, and no disrespect to him, but he's looking at the past more often than not. But I'm looking at somebody who should be looking at the future and see where learning is going to go. So policies don't shift much. What shifts is the human capacity to adapt. So you may have a policy in place, but the practice may be the same. Because culture is difficult to shift. So what will shift the entire culture? Obsession with exams, because you're preparing people for the job market. That obsession is part of our cultural fabric. One policy cannot shift that. And plus education is a concurrent subject, right? So you can have a policy at the center, but unless there's a very deep understanding of what it is in states and in the grassroots. So it's a well-intentioned effort, but it is not adequate to shift the burden that India carries on its shoulders, the burden of a colonized country that is producing clerks, to be able to do Naukri for somebody, right? That mental model, if you live in Kerala, PhDs are applying for a peon's job. I had advertised for 5 drivers' job, and I had MBAs, PhDs, part-time driver. So I mean, what does it signify? It signifies that we are beholden to a job security. We are not going to create wealth. So if business and education is about the romance of wealth creation, the romance is lost on us. We are just looking at the wedlock of a secure job, not the romance of creation of wealth. So if that's what you're looking for, that's what you will get. All right, so policies have to be also nurtured at the ground level with how the policy turns to practice and what prevents practice from changing. This education means what? Does it mean more information, more skills, more jobs? I mean, that's truly not the whole spectrum of education. For me, mediocrity is not about lack of education. Mediocrity is about this me-centered universe. The most mediocre minds are always obsessed with themselves. You can be a president and still be a mediocre. All right? You can be a farmer and can be extraordinary. That's the meaning of education. How do you expand the concerns that are self-obsessive concerns to concerns around the world, concerns around the other? This is education, where the spirit is liberated and where the learner is liberated from self-centered, egocentric impulses. If that hasn't happened, doesn't matter how much technology I know, we'll still create Mickey Mouses. Me and the frog will remain the same, the whale will get bigger. That's it. That's all I had to say. Nothing more about the policy.